Good morning. I'm Peter Kovacs. I'm editor of the Times-Picayune and the Advocate. Welcome to our virtual town hall today with Senator Bill Cassidy about issues related to Ida hurricane recovery. Before we get started, I wanted to thank our sponsor, AARP, and we're going to show a brief message from them and then introduce the Senator.
AARP Louisiana is proud to sponsor today's town hall. I'm Bobby Savoy, AARP Louisiana Volunteer State President. Just like many of you across the state, I know what it's like to lose your home to a natural disaster. I know because I experienced it firsthand. I know too the hard work of rebuilding and putting your life back together. And so does AARP Louisiana. That's why we're connecting you with information and resources like today's town hall. AARP Louisiana is also fighting for better emergency planning for residents at nursing homes and independent living centers. Like you, we were outraged by the images of nursing home residents stranded in a warehouse. We're committed to preventing senseless tragedies like this from ever happening again. AARP also believes that Louisiana utility customers are paying far too much in utility rates to sit in darkness for weeks after each storm. It's time we hold utilities companies for stronger accountability measures for the power grid, as well as for improved responses from our state and federal agencies. That's what we do at AARP. You can learn how we do it and get involved at aarp.org/LA.
Thank you very much. Let's get started by welcoming our guest, Senator Cassidy. Good to see you, sir.
Hey, Peter, thank you for having me, and thanks for all the people who submitted questions.
Okay, well, we have a lot of questions. What I remember about Hurricane Katrina was the first thing people always asked each other is, how much water did you take? And I think in Hurricane Ida, the thing people always ask each other is, how many days did you go without power? So what was your experience, Senator?
Yeah, so we lost power. We had a generator, so ran our refrigerator. We were warm, but that's okay. But I don't even like to talk about that, because when you go down to the bayou and you see homes destroyed, losing power for a couple of days is no big deal. I will say, when I went to JP and Orleans, what people said, the ground is dry. And there was a thankfulness that the levees held. But I also think a lesson that we can build resiliency so that ideally many fewer people lose electricity, otherwise have problems. We can build resiliency. That's what I heard in JP. And that was kind of a good thing to hear.
Yes, it was. And it proves, and I've heard a lot of people say this, it shows that sensible infrastructure spending really can make a difference. And certainly did for New Orleans.
And by the way, when you say make a difference, Peter, we're talking a difference for a home which is not destroyed. From a federal taxpayer, that much less money you're putting into the National Flood Insurance Program. I mean, the ramifications of making a difference is just so pregnant with meaning to the folks whose homes were destroyed in Katrina. I think that's what the folks in the bayou want as well, so that next big storm, the inevitable next big storm, they can say the ground is dry and we still have our lights on.
Well, I hope that happens. Let's get to some of the questions. This came from Curtis of New Orleans, and he says, is there funding for lost income? My wife works in the wine sales industry and services restaurants. Her income is commission only, and her customers haven't come back in any significant numbers, and so her income dropped dramatically. Is there any way that this gets reimbursed from any federal programs?
I'm not sure if it's from a federal program, but you can take an SBA loan, and the SBA loan can bridge that gap. FEMA can potentially help with other lost income. For example, the Individual Disaster Unemployment Program. And if you go to louisianaworks.net, that's the website to which you can access that. Now, the owner, the employees are one thing, the owner is another. But that's where I go back to the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan, or EIDL. And so the SBA has representatives in Louisiana now to help people, and there are recovery systems centers in Lafourche Parish, one at Nicholls State University. There's others in Orleans and St. John's. The one in Orleans is at UNO. At St. John's, at the River Region Chamber of Commerce, Tangipahoa, the Southeastern Louisiana Business Center, and Terrebonne, the East Homa Public Library Meeting Room. So all those are where you can go for those SBA loans, the economic injury disaster loans.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. This comes from Cassandra in Baton Rouge. She says, how long does it take to get a blue roof? I made an application yesterday, September 28th. I guess she thinks it really goes fast, but yeah. I know some people who applied sooner than that.
Yeah, totally. The Blue Roof program, the advantage of using the program as opposed to getting your own tarp and putting it up is that they will stretch it. They have a contractor, they make it work, for the next rain. The disadvantage is that it takes so long. If you've not applied, let me just mention, the phone number is 888-766-3258. 888-766-3258. It has to be verified by aerial imagery, and there may be a home visit required. And they won't contact you until the contractor comes. So you're just kind of out there waiting. I have heard of significant delay. And so I can't tell you exactly when it's going to be done, Cassandra, but I can say that if you get yourself in the queue, it will happen. And there are advantages to having the contractor do it, unless you happen to be really handy as a carpenter and you can put it up yourself.
Yeah, no, if you look at the way they're installed, they're actually very well installed. And, and I am starting to see them more commonly and frequently. This comes from Omar in New Orleans, and he says President Biden has asked home insurance carriers to pay for loss of use expenses related to evacuations from the storm. Hurricane Ida was a Category 4 storm, and City of New Orleans would have issued a mandatory evacuation if there was enough time to do so. Being that it was a voluntary evacuation, it does not qualify for loss of use in most cases. Even with the request from the president, and also, by the way, I think Commissioner Donnellan, few insurance companies are covering this expense, and FEMA does not cover it as well. So what do you intend to do to help families that have spent thousands of dollars on evacuation and have no way to cover their losses?
So first, you're right. Donnellan is attempting to urge them to do so. Let me start over. Check your insurance documents. It could fall under a loss of use coverage. So let me first say that. Donnellan is urging them to do so. This is really more of a Jim Donnellan Department of Insurance issue than it is a federal, because the insurance companies in state markets it's not a national market, it's a state market. And I do know Commissioner Donnellan's attempting to get that. I've heard that some are. But if the insurance doesn't cover, send the denial to FEMA, and FEMA, I'm told, will then make allowances. So obviously this is something which is evolving, but if the insurance doesn't cover, one more time, send the denial to FEMA, and I'm told FEMA may then cover.
Okay. That is one of the most common things that you hear from people as a grievance. And also, it's particularly if you don't have a lot of cash, that by the time you get the denial, it's hard to get your insurance company to issue the paper denial to send it to FEMA. And
there is an ombudsman with the State Department of Insurance. Be sure to register your complaint because the duty of that ombudsman office, OMSBUDSON, I think, or ombudsman. You're the journalist. You know how to spell. I don't. They will take your complaint to the insurance company. But FEMA normally provides up to 2 months of rental assistance, and so that may be able to help you in the gap.
Okay. Joe of River Ridge says, when will FEMA begin to issue reimbursements for generators and chainsaws?
First, if I think just for people who may not know this, You can get up to $800 for generators, even if there was not a medical need, and $250 for chainsaws. The receipts can be faxed, mailed, uploaded to the applicant's FEMA account, or you can go to the disaster recovery system and submit it. Now, you had to have purchased or rented these devices between the 26th of August and September the 25th. And you have to meet the kind of general eligibility requirements for FEMA's individual and household program. Your primary residence has to be in a parish designated for individuals and households. Again, obviously, the person asking the question knows this, but just for those who don't. And the parishes are those you might imagine were affected by the hurricane. And you need proof of purchase, as I mentioned, for the rental receipt or the item. Now, when it's going to come out, I'm not quite sure on that, but we'll try and get that information. And as kind of a follow-up to this program, we will, as a follow-up to this program, we'll either get it to you, Peter, or we'll put it on my website, cassidy.senate.gov, and we'll do our best to find out from FEMA when it starts coming back. So we'll have the answers that we're not totally clicking on today at cassidy.senate.gov, hopefully by close of business, if not by tomorrow.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I don't actually, the asker of this question did not put their email, so I actually don't have a way to get in touch with them. This is from Susan in Baton Rouge. How are you supposed to get DSNAP benefits? The phone line remains busy and you're required to have a phone interview.
Got it. First, let me just say, one thing that's being exposed from this disaster is that the ability of an American to reach the assistance she or he needs to be improved. Let me just give you an anecdote. I was in Tangipahoa. Robbie Miller is the parish president. And before he became parish president, he was a tech consultant. After the storm, he was in their emergency command center, and he had access to high-speed internet. Robbie Miller, tech consultant on high-speed internet, could not apply effectively. So let's just say one of the things we're going to be looking at is how do we improve this experience. But that said, for those who wish to get on DSNAP, you can register online, and the kind of I'll just give you the kind of splash page because they'll have the place to go to registration, and that's DCFS. D as in dog, C as in Cassidy, F as in Frank, S as in Sam, .louisiana.gov. If you go there, it'll take you to where you need for DSNAP registration. You can call 888-524-3578, 888-524-3578 to register. Now, as regards the phone interview, at that point, it's in the state. If you let us know if you're having that problem. Although I'm a federal official, obviously I call state officials on a regular basis. And if you're finding, and we will take this home with us, by the way, we'll notify our contacts in the state government that people are having a hard time getting a phone interview for DSNAP. And we'll see if we can't make this better. And so my staff is off screen. They're taking the note. We will call the relevant state agency and see if we can't get that improved for you.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. There are a bunch of questions. These might be a little more political in nature related to two pieces of legislation. One is the infrastructure bill, which you supported and helped birth, I guess, which I guess is getting a vote in Congress tomorrow. And what would that, I know you support it and it has an uncertain prospect tomorrow. What would that bill do in relation to this hurricane?
So I have to kind of take a deep breath. I'm pretty wound up about this bill because I think it would be so tremendous for Louisiana. Mm-hmm. First, let me say that it would complement, it would not replace the disaster assistance. We're hoping to get a disaster assistance bill that would pay for the damages wrought by this storm as part of a disaster relief community development block grant. And with this, we would be able to help build back housing with the community development block grant, not the infrastructure, but the community development block grant disaster relief. There's a lot of latitude how the money can be used, but a community could use it to repair the damage, to restore the housing, to otherwise recreate a community that was destroyed by the storm. And when you go down in the bayou, you see whole towns just kind of wiped off the map, except for one or two of newer structures built to hurricane coastal code. The infrastructure bill, which you asked specifically of, let me just name a couple of revisions, and you'll see the implications. There's $50 billion nationwide for resiliency, including, I think it is $17 billion off the top of my head for Army Corps of Engineers. Of that, there's $3.5 billion at least, but more if you add up the different pots of money that would go towards coastal restoration. It doesn't mention Louisiana by name, but it says that the bill shall prioritize states hit by natural disasters in the last 6 years. Hello, that's us.
Yeah.
Coastal restoration. You're not going to give it to Minnesota. You're not going to give it to Wyoming, and you're probably not going to give it to Delaware. You're going to give it to us, at least a sizable chunk of it. There's $3.5 billion to FEMA for flood mitigation efforts, prioritizing areas that recently flooded. Makes sense. We're trying to reduce the stress upon the National Flood Insurance Program. So you're going to go to places that flooded. It doesn't spell out Louisiana, but it effectively says Louisiana. So that will help not just the areas hit by this disaster. Remember, disaster relief only goes to the area hit by disaster. This would go to other areas prone to disaster, prone to flooding. The capital region didn't really flood that much with the storm, but we flooded a heck of a lot in 2016. So the capital region would benefit. There's also $3.5 billion to harden the grid. Now, you may be in a section of the state unaffected by Ida, but the next big storm, we want that grid to be hardened too. Of course, it's spread out across the nation, but it is prioritizing areas subject to natural disasters. When the president came to New Orleans recently to JP, actually Kenner, I spoke to him. I said, Mr. President, this infrastructure bill can harden the grid. It would help us in Louisiana. He goes, you're absolutely right. So when folks say somehow that the president's going to, do a dirty deed to Louisiana, it's on his mind that this bill can help Louisiana. One more thing I will mention, and this may seem a little bit tangential. There's $65 billion to provide all Americans, including those who live in Louisiana, access to high-speed internet. Why am I mentioning this in context of the storm? I've learned that federal, state, and locals now communicate information regarding disasters, but many other things, by social media. When I was a kid, it was this kind of blaring sort of thing on the interruption of your TV program. Now you're going to get something on your phone that pops up and says, evacuate because the storm's about to hit. I was down speaking to Chet Chasson, who's the port director at Port Fourchon. They were in their emergency command center. When the power lines went down, they lost power, but they still had fiber optic and they were communicating via internet. So it's clear now that high-speed internet is essential to disaster preparedness, intra-disaster communication, and restoration afterwards. One more thing. Again, I'm so committed to getting this done. But I was down with Chet, and the fellow was there, and this is such a wife thing. All this disaster and everything else, but she was focused on the fact they had to pay their FICA, and she couldn't do her FICA because by this time the utility companies had cut the fiber optic. They no longer had internet. You can't do commerce without high-speed internet. Fortunately, Congress and IRS had worked together to create you can delay filing because of the storm, by the way. But she was, so conscientious about paying her taxes that even in the midst of the storm, she wanted to do so. You can't conduct commerce with that high-speed internet. I could go on, Peter, but this would have an incredible beneficial effect, not just for those affected by Ida, but for other parts of our state that are vulnerable.
Yeah. So coming to the sort of related series of questions, which are about the specific aid bill, the specific aid for Laura and Ida.
Laura and Delta, I think, right?
Yeah, I guess it's Laura, Delta, Zeta, and Ida, maybe, or something like that. It's these Greek letters are confusing. That is as some of the questions relate to the fact that you oppose other things in that measure, particularly related to the debt limit. And so if you could explain that, how you see it, how you would vote, and what you would prefer to vote, what you would prefer to be in the measure you would vote on.
So first, let me say, this is a very process thing. And so I apologize. I don't normally like to talk about process. First, let me say that the disaster relief for Delta, Laura, and Zeta will pass today or tomorrow. So we're speaking about something which has occurred, but which has worked out. There is a continuing resolution, which is a short-term budget resolution that allows the government to stay open until the final budget is passed. That has to be passed by midnight tomorrow night, midnight tomorrow night, so the government does not shut down. Attached to that was hurricane relief for Laura, Delta, and Zeta, and a short-term extension of the National Flood Insurance Program. Three things important to us. Majority Leader Schumer, Democratic Majority Leader Schumer, wanted to put a debt ceiling increase on top of that. Mitch McConnell told him 2 months ago that would not pass, 2 months ago, but he attached it anyway. By the way, it came from the House of Representatives. It wasn't attached. It was what Senator Schumer did attach. Now, whether I voted for it or not didn't matter, because every other Republican voted against it. Kennedy and Cassidy waited to make sure that this was the case, but every other Republican voted against it, because we had signaled, Mitch had signaled that the debt ceiling should not be attached to it, and it failed. It's going to come back up tonight or tomorrow without the debt ceiling. It will pass. We will have the aid for Laura, Delta, and Zeta. You also mentioned Hurricane Ida. That's going to be another bill, a separate bill, that too will pass. And it helps us that the Northeast was affected, that New York, where Senator Schumer is from, was affected. So it's not just people in Louisiana advocating, it's now people in another part of the country, in both parties, that are trying to get relief for their sections. And that bill will pass much more quickly than has the relief bill for the Southwest Louisiana.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to hear. Let's go back to some of the more specific questions. This is from Joe in River Ridge. I'm sorry. This is from Frank in Harahan, and he says, will FEMA pay for the gas in the generators?
No, they will pay for the generator. They'll pay for the generator, but not the gas. Mm-hmm. They do pay for hotels and things like that, but they will not pay for the gas for the generator.
Okay. This comes from Marvell in Metairie, who says that he did not receive $500 from FEMA and he was evacuated for 2 weeks.
I just saw where they were going to make that easier to get the $500. So it should be that you can contact the folks at FEMA and they would make that available. Again, we'll post on my website, but it just came across this morning. Now you have to indicate a critical need. And so it just can't be that, hey, Bill Cassidy lost electricity for 2 days, so he's going to get $500. You had to indicate a critical need when you registered. So think back when you registered with FEMA, did you indicate that need? So for example, not enough food, didn't have a place to live, that sort of thing. Um, uh, if you indicated that critical need, clothing, then or medicine, then you would qualify. So think back, Frank, as to whether or not you indicated that critical need.
Mm. Then James of Gonzales asks if you can submit hotel and food expenses beyond your deductible.
One more thing I should mention on that critical need issue:
Mhm.
you can't go back and change. It's whatever you filed initially. By the way, just to tell you that.
Mhm.
And I'm told that it's box 23 of the application summary. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question, James's question?
James's question was, can you submit hotel and food expenses beyond the deductible?
Now, FEMA doesn't pay for food.
Okay.
But if you have immediate housing need, call 211 and they'll refer you to the nearest shelter. And by the way, there's some people living in tents. And so at some point they may decide that they need to get out of the tent. So there's still people who might be applying for immediate shelter. There is a living expense or loss of use coverage with some people's insurance. And you are expected to use the insurance first. And if you don't have insurance, then they can help you with some other living expenses, but it's going to be slower. It's typically not full. So just to say that.
Okay. This comes from Thomas in Thibodeau, and he says his home sustained damage from Hurricane Ida, and he applied for assistance, hoping to get some help on his $6,000 deductible. He was denied assistance because he has homeowners insurance, and I guess he's asking whether the fact that whether he's allowed in aid for the deductible portion of it.
Got it. If the loss is less than your deductible, FEMA may help, but you have to apply and get denied for an SBA loan first. Again, going back to having to make this easier, but that's the current process. The government won't pay your deductible to unlock assistance from your own insurance. So that's the two aspects of it. If it's less than your deductible, maybe an SBA loan, you got to apply, and FEMA may help if you're denied for SBA, but it's just not, okay, we're just not going to pay it because you have a deductible.
Okay. This one is someone who didn't register their name, but he says he's a responsible homeowner and he's always acquired homeowners insurance because it's the responsible thing to do. And essentially he's saying, why are we giving aid to people who didn't have homeowners insurance when this gentleman has been paying for homeowners insurance and working 50 hours a week to do it, he says.
Well, first you can say that, one, thank you for being the good citizen. But I can tell you, it would be better to have homeowners assistance right now than waiting for FEMA. The insurance assistance is slower. It's typically not full, just to say that. And we've been thinking really hard about how do we get housing back in those places where housing is destroyed. And if you've got homeowners, you're much more likely to get permanent housing solutions back sooner than with FEMA. By the way, if FEMA didn't help, you may end up with blighted properties in your neighborhood, which then drives down the value of your property. That's what's happening right now in Lake Charles. Blighted property is destroying neighborhoods. And FEMA only pays up to $36,000. So if your damage is too much, it still doesn't help. So I feel your frustration. You want people to be good citizens, but by the way, it actually pays to be as responsible as you've been.
Yeah. This is what couple of more questions. This is from Deanna of Harvey. And she says, with housing availability so scarce, are they considering extending the TSA? I don't know what the TSA is. Maybe you know.
Well, I'm not sure what the TSA is. Temporary. I'm not sure. You make a sense. But FEMA and GOSEP and the parishes are making a housing plan for each parish. They're trying to repair the existing housing stock. They're talking about temporary housing, FEMA trailers, for example. They're talking about setting up camps, bringing in boats for people to live on. We need a permanent housing solution. And so we're going to spend a lot of money on, I'm sorry. So first, let me say that. So they are talking about that. There's going to be some lag time. I had a conversation with FEMA last week about this. They have trailers that are ready to move down. There are restrictions. The trailers can't be sited in a place which is subject to flooding. It has to be higher ground. Even if you elevate, they will only allow to bring in a trailer and elevate if there's no land anyplace else in which they don't have to elevate. So this is not going to be prompt. As an aside, I will tell you that we're trying to look how we can revamp these programs so that we can set up more permanent housing built to hurricane coastal code in a more quick manner, as opposed to we'll get around to that for 4 years later. People need to have permanent housing solutions sooner. But that's one of the things that's going to be a lot of work to get to that point because there's a lot of regulation stopping it from happening.
Okay, let me ask one last question because we said we would do about a half hour, and I know there's a lot going on in Washington right now. How, people here have had, negative experiences with FEMA in Hurricane Katrina, but that was 16 years ago. How is FEMA doing? Is FEMA, you hear less of that, so I assume FEMA's probably better run than it was in those days, but what's your evaluation of how they're doing?
They've learned a heck of a lot. They are so much better than they were in FEMA. Inevitably, when there's a disaster this big, there's going to be some places that are reached later. But I was speaking to Matt, the parish president of St. Charles Parish, right after the storm. He said, FEMA's not here yet. And so right then I got an email or text message from Ron Klain, Joe Biden's chief of staff. I said, listen, St. Charles Parish, you should be able to get to it. Can you help? And he had Cedric Richmond call me right away. Cedric said, I know, Matt, I'll call him. I'll take care of it. And it happened. So they've been very responsive, both the administration and the administrators. On the other hand, I went down to Pointe-aux-Chenes, which is really south in the bayou, and they weren't really seeing FEMA yet. In fairness, it would take 4 hours to get there. It took us 4 hours because there's so many utility trucks repairing phone lines and power lines that traffic would be really backed up. And there's no place for them to live if they went there. So they've gotten a heck of a lot better. There are still areas not receiving direct attention as soon as they should. There's at least some part of that which is understood both by the magnitude of disaster and the difficulty reaching people. But we need to continue to improve the process. In the inevitable future hurricane, ideally, it's better yet.
Okay. Well, Senator, we appreciate you joining us and answering all these reader questions. And, hopefully we'll do this again and have better news and things will be in better shape.
Hey, so, Peter, thanks for hosting. Thanks for everybody for submitting the questions. Again, our website, cassidy.senate.gov, will have the resource, at least by close of business or tomorrow morning, of all these websites and phone numbers I've been listing and some of the questions I couldn't completely answer. So thank you all.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you joining us.
Yes, sir.
Take care.
Bye.